Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. This is David Bixenspan here, along with my co-host, the great Brian Last, for the first ever episode of 605, our new old school wrestling podcast, which will not entirely be about old TBS wrestling, although that's definitely going to be one of our topics on our first show here. And Brian, I mean, people heard you when you were on Between the Sheets, and they will again, but why don't you talk about why we decided to do this podcast, and I guess for those who didn't hear who you are or don't know or whatever, go ahead.
Okay, wonderful segue there. First of all,
I'm very good at those.
Yeah, I think you said Thanksgiving, but I want to also wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and welcome to the first edition of the 605 Superpodcast. I know Bix is doesn't want to call it Superpodcast, but it was in the logo and I kind of like it. It's the only podcast that's on Turner time. A little bit about me. I really hate doing this. I don't know what to say exactly. I'm a longtime wrestling fan. I hate the current product for the most part, or at least I hate current WWE. There's other good stuff. New Japan's pretty good. I love classic wrestling. I've been around the business in various ways from the age of 13 or so on. I had Vince Russo book my bar mitzvah. I was at Smoky Mountain Fan Week. I spent time on Terry Funk's ranch. I did a lot of stuff with Dennis Carluzzo, the late great promoter out of New Jersey. I've been a good friend with Jim Cornette, did some stuff with Ring of Honor later on. And then I guess most prominently, my background's in the music business. I worked for several years at Sony Music, and I have and continue to work with many of the great and wonderful independent rock bands in Brooklyn, New York, primarily.
And really, the podcast is just an excuse for us to talk about old wrestling.
Exactly. When Bix told me he was up for a couple of the Sheedy Awards, which is the first time I had heard of them, I was kind of upset I wasn't nominated for Best Guest because I think my critically acclaimed appearance on Between the Sheets should have been enough to get me nominated for something.
Yeah, I think everyone else that was nominated for Best Guest had multiple appearances, so you'll probably next year.
Was there a Best Guest category?
Yes. No, there really was.
Oh, so I was just snubbed.
Yes. Well, I mean, you haven't been as prominent yet as what's the word I'm looking for?
Prominent.
I don't think I mean prominent. In terms of number of appearances, that's not necessarily prominent. As someone like Dylan or whoever has been this year, so
God damn it, I'm prominent as hell. And it's not about quantity, it's about quality.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, so the I am your quadruple nominated Sheedy Award, four-time Sheedy Award nominee this year. But anyway, we just wanted, so yeah, that's terrible. But let's just get started. I mean, the first thing we're going to talk about is, because of the name, kind of what we remember and first got into with TBS wrestling, and we'll just kind of segue from there. We probably won't stick to the topics that strictly ever. Is that probably the best way to put it?
Yeah, I guess that kind of sums it up. Why don't we start with, I was trying to think of it the other day, but let me ask you first, Bix. What are your earliest memories? Me and you both being Jewish kids from Long Beach, New York. What are your earliest memories of TBS wrestling? Because obviously we grew up in a primarily WWF area, Nassau Coliseum, a regular stop right down the road, and Channel 5 every Saturday morning after the cartoons, before American Gladiators, before Rock and Roller Games, had WWF Superstars of Wrestling on Saturdays and Wrestling Challenge on Sundays. So how did you discover, and what are your earliest memories of actual wrestling on TBS?
I've thought about this because I feel like I can sort of pinpoint my earliest memories for WWF, but even then, I don't think it's when I actually started watching. Because it's like, my dad was watching stuff, so I was just watching WWF at least as long as I can remember. And I remember seeing other stuff too. Like, I remember seeing like All Japan Women on Tempo. You know what I mean? So it's like I can't really think of what the earliest memory is, but I know when I really got into it was '89. Like, that's when I know I really got into NWA, WCW, whatever on TBS, and I was trying to think like I said, I know I saw it before. I remember vaguely remember seeing stuff from before, but that's when I know I really got into it. And I know with you, because even though you are, we have the same birthday but a few years apart, right?
Correct.
And did I find so are you 79 or 7?
I'm 35 years old, correct.
Okay. So you are. So you're exactly 5 years older than me. But you started watching wrestling, so I guess around that time in general. So for you, was it like, was that when, did you get into WCW around that time or a little later?
Well, what happened was I knew of wrestling when Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling was on Saturday mornings on CBS. I was a big fan of that. I had, many of the LJNs. I believe I gave my sister stitches once by hitting her over the head with the Andre the Giant LJN, the one with the afro before they gave him the haircut.
And those things are could be weapons, by the way.
Oh, they were
those would
fantastic.
never get made now.
You could throw those things at anyone. They were great.
Also, I know I had the LJNs going back I know I had it might have been like my second birthday that I first got those. I got, because it was like the Hillbilly Jim Hogan 2-pack, and then someone else got me another one, but I was too young to want to return it. So I had 2 sets of Hogan and Hillbilly Jim, and I used one of the Hogans as Natural Butch Reed because he had the blonde hair, and I thought Hogan was black because of the tan.
I got Andre the Giant at my cousin's bris, I believe. Some other cousins from out of town came in, and it's traditional that you give people gifts. And I got the Andre the Giant Afro LJN, and shortly after that, I got the Jimmy Snuka LJN, and then eventually I got Hogan. So I think that's the first set. Andre the Giant was in the very first batch. I think it was Andre, Hogan, Big John Studd, Iron Sheik, and either Snuka or Nikolai. I don't remember. So I had that right off the bat, and I was watching Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. Never really watched actual wrestling on TV. My father, for reasons I never really understood, because he wasn't a wrestling fan, ordered WrestleMania 3 and recorded it for me, so that years later when I became a wrestling fan, I had the actual video of the pay-per-view showing. And then in 1989, I got interested in WWF right before WrestleMania 5, and I started buying WWF magazine and really got into it quick. And when I was at school and I would tell the other kids in 4th grade how much I enjoyed wrestling, a bunch of the kids, and funny enough, and you would understand the reference, and other people wouldn't, kids from the West End of Long Beach, which were certainly demographically a little bit different than the Jewish kids from the East End of Long Beach, all of them were the ones who would tell me, oh, you got to watch the NWA. You got to watch the NWA. And I'd never heard of it. And I'll never forget the way it was described to me. It was described to me that there are 5 guys bigger than Andre there. And then there are these guys, the Road Warriors, and they have spikes and they stab people with them. And then there's a
which was true at the time.
They stabbed one guy once.
But still.
It's not true. It's not true. They stabbed one guy once, and I don't even know if they ever showed it again on TV after 1988. And then the third one was the kicker, they said. And then they have a tag team named the Dynamic Dudes, and they have skateboards covered in blood, which couldn't have been further from the truth. So I said, this sounds amazing. 5 guys bigger than Andre. When can I see this? Where can I see this? And every one of them told me TBS, which I think was Channel 27 at the time,
mm-hmm.
Channel 27 at 6 o'clock on Saturday. And for about a month straight, I tuned in at 6 o'clock and nothing. I was like, where's the wrestling? This is ridiculous. And then finally, maybe a month out, I tuned back in at around 6:30 or so, and I got to see wrestling. And the first person I saw on NWA Wrestling was the Great Muta. And I had not seen anything like him before. And I was like, this is great. Now, the production looked kind of shitty. I don't remember if it was in center stage. I don't think it was, but it was kind of dark. And Gary Hart kind of looked, bootleg to a 9-year-old who's used to the glamour of the WWF. And I saw Muta, and I'd never seen a moonsault before. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I had to leave or do something else. And the next week, I tuned back in, around 6:20, 6:30 again, not trying the 6 o'clock because that wasn't working. I didn't know anything about Turner time. And I saw Muta again. Every time I tuned in for like the first 3 weeks, all I saw was Muta. And then I remember the commercial for Great American Bash 89. And I remember seeing Ricky Steamboat, and I remember seeing he was really the one I knew the best, but I remember thinking, like, Sting is a lot like the Ultimate Warrior, and even his music is a little bit like the Ultimate Warriors. And then you come to find out they used to be tag team partners and everything. And right around this time, too, I started getting the Apter magazines. We had this really great newsstand by where I lived, and they had every magazine you could imagine.
Which one?
The Cozy Nook.
Of course. Okay. This with the people who are not from here are not going to care about this, but I had to ask.
The Cozy Nook, who was owned by this guy named Marvin, who they had a really good diner where you could eat French toast all the time, which is all I ever want to do. And Marvin had some kind of phlegm problem. So like no matter what was going on, you just hear it was really hard to sit there and eat with this guy coughing up phlegm nonstop all day. But I got my first After magazines and I brought them home. And I remember towards the end of '89, there was a 10-year, the '80s issue of either Pro Wrestling Illustrated or one of the other magazines. And I was exposed to wrestlers I'd never heard of and never seen because I was used to WWF and I knew a little bit about NWA now. And I've been watching pretty devotedly since September. And then I found out about the Von Erichs, who I'd never seen. And I remember there was a memorial page in that '89 Decade in Review issue, and just about every dead wrestler on that page was from World Class, and half of them were Von Erichs. And then you get exposed to wrestlers who you've never seen, and you have no idea how to pronounce their names. I remember I grew up in a household where we watched ABC. So my mother watched ABC, and my father watched sports, whatever channel it was on. So I was used to shows that were on ABC. I never watched CBS or NBC. So I remember reading the magazine, be like, wow, who's Magnum Ta? Like, what kind of name is this? Who is this guy? And then, couldn't pronounce Zabisco. I was like, who's Kamala, the Udganan giant? I didn't know what Uganda was. I was 9. And that kind of began, there were two types of fans. There are the fans who watch casually and don't care. Then there are the fans who watch and just need to know more and need to know more and need to dig deeper and find out who everyone is. And that really began it.
Yeah, and, with the magazines, like, we'll talk more about magazines and stuff later. But
Magnum Ta.
Yes. Well, and I was thinking, like, for me, like, I know the one I always remember with me was that, like, looking at who's this Chris Bennett guy wrestling Jushin Liger in Japan.
Yeah. I got to admit, I'm going to jump in I never got the Liger bug like everyone else did. I remember it was a big deal when he fought Pillman, and those were kind of cool, but I've never really thought he was that good. And I know that may be blasphemous to so many people, although, considering how many people have turned on Sayama, the original Tiger Mask, through the years, I got to say, I'm not a big Liger guy.
Well, I think a lot of the Liger appreciation, though, comes from the way he kind of evolved over time. I mean, although some of the earlier stuff, like I love the Naoki Sano feud, which is like his first big program.
Yeah, when he had the original outfit. And
also because it's more of a blood feud, and it's less of a just, Jushin Liger Ultimo Dragon Dream match type match. But so same thing for Liger versus El Samurai or someone like that. But I think it's where, like, if you follow, like, Liger, as he evolved, and he has the what was it? First the broken leg, then the broken ankle, then the brain tumor, all within, like, 3 years. And then he just kind of changed. I think that, like, and then, like, when he would do the stuff, like, he'd do the promotional stuff and wrestle like a heel. I think that's where some of that comes from. Like, at least people who kind of stuck with him.
Maybe the most superficial thing I'll say today is I think maybe because he didn't change outfits. Yes, I kind of got sick.
Well, he stopped. He did, and then he stopped.
And then he stopped. I know. And then it was like, oh, again? But again, I know I'm in the minority. I know I'm in the vast minority to say that I'm not a big Liger fan. But anyway.
So with Turner Time, do you think I wonder if most people actually realize what that came from, like why Turner did that on TBS, which was that he realized that if you had shows start at a time that no one else had, and you did that TV guide in their listings, because people who were, I guess, 10 years younger than us would be about the right way to frame this. They don't realize that TV guide, it really was not built around having a grid. It was built around mostly, like, there would be a grid, like, for the primetime network shows, but otherwise it was just a listing where it would be just, literally a list. It would be 6 p.m., Channel 2, Channel 5, Channel 7, etc. So if you had 6:05, it would be separate. And that was the idea behind Turner Time.
Yeah, I believe that really started in August, September of '79 when he officially changed his network from WTCG, Turner Communications Group, I believe, to TBS, was when he instituted what became, known as Turner Time, and what caused me to miss the NWA for the first month I tried to watch it.
And by the way, do you know what the, like, in TV joke name was for what WTCG stood for?
No.
Watch Ted chase girls.
And Gunkel? A few years ago, I was talking to Jimmy Cornette, and I said, I just saw this old magazine. Do you ever realize Dixie Carter looks like Ann Gunkel?
She does.
And he did a spit take. He's like, I swear to Christ, I just said the same thing to Jerry Jarrett last week, and he spit. Yeah, and I think they actually may have a little bit in common too, just in terms of I don't know. I guess you really can't say if Ann Gunkel was inept.
You can't really know if she was going to be a good promoter or not. No.
Yeah. So, but apparently she had a relationship with Ted, which
or it as in Dave Meltzer cryptic terms, Aunt Gunkel, who had a close relationship with Ted Turner or whatever.
Yeah. Well, whatever it was, whether it was sexual or not, it was the relationship she had by being in that community, which led to her being able to retain the television time for as long as she did.
Yeah, and also, that's one of my favorite things about that whole War for Georgia story is that first, she's very unjustly forced out of her husband's company right after he dies, and then she is able to get her own hour on WTCG, and it's taped like right after the NWA hour in the same studio.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
Yeah, and then when All South closes, that's the beginning of the 2-hour show.
I don't feel like that's pointed out enough that Ann Gunkel was 100% justified in expecting to retain her husband Ray's stock in the company.
Yeah, they literally dissolved the company and started a new one. Like Georgia Championship Wrestling, the company, was started when he died. It's ridiculous. Like there are stories. Like I think weren't some of them actually like doing plans at the funeral, like the Welches and stuff.
It wouldn't surprise me, but I actually don't know that.
I'm trying to. Have you ever read Show Cold?
I haven't. I've been meaning to though.
If you, it's cheap on Kindle. Because I didn't have my hard copy anymore. Whenever I last looked, it is really cheap on Kindle. And as much as Jim Wilson, you have to take everything he says about himself with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I think
it's all the stuff about the War for Georgia is really, really good.
Well, did he end up going through trial transcripts and court papers to get information about all that? Am I remembering correctly?
It was, that's where a lot of that sourced from. It was discovery in his own lawsuit. And yeah, the Kindle version's $6. I think on Google Books it's even cheaper. Well worth it. I mean, it's like 500-page book, something like that. So, I mean, it's really well researched. It's well worth reading as long as you know to take the stuff about Jim Wilson himself with a grain of salt.
What are you trying to say? He wasn't going to be the NWA champion if he slept with Jim Barnett?
I don't even think Jim Barnett even wanted to sleep with him.
That's kind of what was pointed out on that Morton Downey Jr. episode with him, right?
Right, which I'm trying to remember what Downey says, because he's one of the guests along with... Now that thing's on YouTube, but I first saw it when you loaned me your copy of it on the Best of Dennis Corluzzo and Friends tape.
Well, Dennis Corluzzo was a great friend of mine. His son Mark and his son Dennis were good friends of mine. I used to spend a lot of time in South Jersey with them, and Dennis would give me tapes and tell me, hey, take them home, make copies, bring them back. And a lot of them were very simple. It's okay, here's Calgary from this week and this week. But some of them were just all over the place. So I made compilations, the best of Dennis Corluzzo and Friends. Yeah. And that was one of the things on him. It was a Morton Downey Jr. episode, and it was Jim Wilson, who, whether you want to take with a grain of salt everything he says or not, he's somewhat reasonable and logical and rational.
Because he was a non-wrestling person looking at it from the point of view of, hey, I was in the NFL where I have a pension and blah, blah, blah.
Right. And to counteract that, they had David Schultz and Lou Albano and Tony Altamore for some reason.
And Paul Heyman on the phone.
Ted Arcidi. And the only person that had Jim Wilson's back was Thunderbolt Patterson.
Of course.
It is a train wreck, but a hysterical one. Dennis at one point offers to put up the money for the match between, I think, Jim Wilson and David Schultz.
And I love when Ted Arcidi is up at the podium and he's just cheerleading against Thunderbolt Patterson. He's like, who, when he's talking about discrimination, he's like, come on, who in this audience has heard of Tony Atlas? And I'm trying to, that's the only name I remember him bringing up, but and this is also Ted Arcidi, who, as far as I know, was this was from, 89?
88?
But it was pretty much completely out of the business already by that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
And just very weird, and but he has an outsider's point of view, which is both helpful and made him believe things like, oh yeah, you'll be world champion more than other wrestlers would.
Yeah.
But it really is, if you're into wrestling history at all, especially if you're into Georgia stuff and TBS stuff and all that, it really is a book worth reading. So you should definitely get the Kindle version. Then if it's just $6, it's really, really good.
Come on, Bix, don't you have like a referral code or something?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll put a link in the post when this goes up. But
okay.
If you want to just go to tinyurl.com/BixAmazon tinyurl.com/BixAmazon is if you just want to go straight to Amazon to use my referral code.
Yeah, probably a good idea to give the right link.
Bix Amazon.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. So as far as TBS, like I'm trying to think back, like when we became fans, I mean, it was really pretty, it was the early WCW, like kind of classic lineup when we first really got into it, which was Power Hour. What is up with me tonight? Power Hour Friday nights, Power Hour replayed on early Saturday morning, then World Championship Wrestling on Saturday evening, and main event on Sunday evening. But going back years, and I don't remember when they added the Sunday show originally. It was originally the show that was Best of Championship Wrestling, which, as far as I know, I think it actually did higher ratings a lot of the time, didn't it?
That's what I had always heard, yes.
Which I never really heard why. If there was an explanation, was it because, you're seeing arena matches, you're seeing wrestlers from other parts of the country, etc.?
I think it may just be people's viewing habits on different days of the week, Saturday versus Sunday.
Maybe. I mean, Bischoff talks about how...
If there's a football game on Saturday afternoon, you're home Saturday, or Sunday afternoon, excuse me. You're home Sunday night or Sunday at 6:05. Conversely, if you're, getting ready for work or school the next day, you're probably home Sunday evening. Saturday is the night people go out, people do things.
Right. As Eric Bischoff constantly points out when he's asked about the beginnings of Nitro, Saturday evening, 6:05 Eastern, 3:05 Pacific, because they didn't have a split feed, not the best slot for your A show.
Right. It's funny that for so many years, I mentioned that we used to see WWF on Saturday mornings on Channel 5 here in New York, the Fox affiliate. And TBS wrestling was obviously, as you just previously mentioned, littered all over the schedule on weekends. And nowadays, there really isn't weekend wrestling on TV.
No, it's weird because that's when wrestling was. I mean, you don't even have like a weekend B show. I think even like the late Saturday Night Raw replay thing that did surprisingly good ratings, I think is gone.
Last week I DVR'd. I said, I want to see what's on the weekend. I DVR'd the two wrestling shows I found. One was Lucha Azteca, and the other was Paragon Pro Wrestling, which I guess is about to leave the air. So that
yes,
and
I think it's
Gunk will put her show
already.
Yeah, so I DVR'd those, and that was all I could find on a weekend.
Paragon is absolutely terrible, by the way. Did you watch it?
I tried to watch the first few minutes. You know what drives me crazy? I feel like part of the problem with WWE, and there's many, is that the format sucks, and the format isn't conducive to producing a contemporary product that would draw new people in and engage people who have given up on the product. And it bothers me that everywhere I look, and I like Ring of Honor for the most part, but Ring of Honor, TNA, even Paragon, it's like the exact same. We're going to have like a little stage and a little ramp, and everyone's going to walk down it. And Paragon Pro, I watch it, and this guy standing in the ring doing interviews or promos, as we're supposed to call them. And, there's no one there interviewing them. They just somehow get a mic and they start talking. And when people do run-ins, music plays and people run out. It's just all this shit that WWE does that doesn't work. Everyone else just copies now. Someone should just sit down with a pad and pen and say, okay, what is everyone doing? And let's now do the exact opposite of what everyone is doing.
Yeah, it's like it's just not accessible in the same way, even though WWE tries their damnedest to have a show that someone, I guess preferably a small child, can put on and understand everything. It's like, I think back, I never had any trouble catching up with a new wrestling promotion, ever.
Let me say, as someone who has 2 young children in the house, it's not easy to put them in front of WWE and have them understand what the hell's going on.
Yeah, I feel like it's much more complicated now.
Yeah.
And what was the original thing I was getting? Oh, so as far as like Best of Championship Wrestling on Sundays on TBS, because so that's really kind of before our time a little bit, and it's something we've never really seen that much of because even though it was the higher rated show, there's really not that much of it floating around on tape either.
Right. You know, that reminds me of what was a big deal to me in 92, because I'd really not begun tape trading yet. And around that time was when they did the Clash of the Champions in, I think, September. And that was when they had clips of old TBS wrestling.
Yes, because
and that was a big deal.
Yeah, because it was also the 20th anniversary of wrestling on TBS. Yeah.
That's all I had to say.
Oh, yeah, no, I remember too. I remember watching that and being like, "Wow!" It's like, "Oh, that's the Freebird. That's what the Freebirds used to look like," and that type of thing. And by the way, do you know who was one of the people that supplied them with a lot of those clips since they didn't have masters in most of those?
Steve Friedlander,
Scott Hudson.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Because I think was it him? Because there's stuff that really never saw the light of day that much. Because Pedicino did that History of Wrestling in Georgia show, and I don't know if it came from Scott, but he had stuff like Ray Gunkel matches in there that I don't think ever showed up anywhere else. And he him and Scott are always good friends.
Scott Hudson just wrote an op-ed, or maybe that's not the right.
It was an interview recap.
It was an interview recap. I saw the headline and then I read a little bit of it. But he's right about their announcing being awful.
Yeah. I feel bad for them, though, because if you watched the Japan special in the summer, which was Cole mostly on his own or being produced by someone else other than Vince, which we don't. I can't remember if there was someone else producing him. He was pretty good. I mean, he was Michael Cole when History came up and stuff like that, but he was just so much more natural and more of just a solid announcer.
Yeah, he sucks. He sucks no matter any way you look at it. And the problem is they indoctrinate these commentators, and then they all go out into the world, and now
Jonathan Coachman.
Jonathan Coachman, Josh Matthews, they all speak the same way. They're all full of shit. They're all terrible at what they do. The worst is obviously Matt Stryker, who, I wish someone would cut his vocal cords out. He's just so awful that it's beyond words. He thought Yoshihashi. He thought Hashi was his last name. Was that right? So,
yeah, I was watching Rey Mysterio versus Amazing Red from SummerSlam weekend. Which really good match, by the way. Get it, from House of Glory, which I guess they sell it directly. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, they had Stryker as one of the commentators, and he's constantly talking about how in this match, and I think Amazing Red is a great wrestler and these days pretty underrated since he doesn't really work on any major shows. But he's talking about how Ray and Red are two of the greatest luchadors of all time.
It's like he tries too hard to be cute or whatever it is.
Right, or the thing where he's asking Kevin Kelly, can I be the one to say Larietto?
Yeah, sorry. I took a little bit of a break there, but he's horrible. He's like the worst kind of smart fan in a way, the one who's ignorant.
Yeah, it's almost like we're spoiled by seeing even aging drunk Gordon Solie.
That's the problem. It's like even when you find a wrestling product that's good, you need someone who can commentate. Mauro Ranallo is so good. Yet he only does New Japan Wrestling, and then everything else you see is just terrible.
Yeah, I like
Kevin, or here.
Yeah, I like Kevin Kelly, and I think he's a good announcer, but I think he tries way too hard in ROH.
I think he tries too hard, and I notice that there are, much like segments of this program here today, long bouts of silence when he does his announcing, and it bothers me because you see him in the camera. You see him sitting at ringside, just staring at the ring. It's say something.
Yeah, didn't he say something that related to that recently? When he was explaining how he would be calling New Japan without having that much prep, and it was saying something about it being more of a wrestling-centric product so that he has more pauses. So I think he related that to ROH. So I guess it's something he's aware of.
I don't know. If that's a move by choice, it's not a good move.
And bringing things back to TBS wrestling,
Yeah.
I think the thing I miss the most, just in a conceptual sense, is Clash of the Champions.
Right. That was always a cool thing in the middle of the week. You know, I remember watching we were talking about 89, getting into it. The first one I remember really watching was the Terry Funk Ric Flair I Quit match. I watched that one from beginning to end. And, you know, obviously the two highlights were that and then the Jim Cornette turning on the Dynamic Dudes.
Yeah, and also one of the highlights being them pretending they were in New York City when they were in Troy.
Yeah, nowhere
which
near.
Is by Albany, right?
Yeah, it's somewhere upstate. I'm not exactly sure. I think it's by Albany, but I don't even know.
Yeah, it's closer to I believe it's closer to Toronto than it is to New York City.
And let me also jump in here and tell our listeners, this is the first time I've ever done a podcast with this new microphone I got here. I used to just do them over the telephone. So I'm playing with the volume to make sure it's not too loud. If it is, just send Bix an angry tweet and we'll fix it for the next show. But
some of that gets adjusted automatically after the fact, so you don't need to tinker with
well,
it.
You could still send angry tweets to, what is it, at David Bix?
Yes.
Yeah, let him know what you think. Magnum Ta!
Like, I don't know, like, I'm not getting enough angry tweets as it is.
Do you get a lot of angry tweets?
Not as much as I used to.
What are people usually angry about?
I don't know. Today I was getting in some of the Twitter conversations that Road Dogg Brian James was having. I don't know if you saw any of those.
I did. He's trying really hard to be the good company soldier, isn't he?
Yeah, and I don't blame him for that to a point. Like, he even says, like, what do you expect? I work there, I'm commenting publicly on it, and they saved my life. But, so I don't expect him to bash. No, they did. Cause
I mean, what do you say to that? Yeah.
Right, because, I mean, they paid for him to go to rehab. They paid for all of his brothers to go to rehab. But then he's saying things like, well, you know, it's the most profitable the company has ever been, which is 100% not true. It's probably going to be the highest revenue year ever, but that's not profit. It started talking about, you know, DVRs and stuff when their big thing was DVR proof. And then he says to me when I'm being, you know what, I'm not being like all arguey. He just tweets at me, "Did you used to be a fan?"
Did you say yes?
I think, well, first I said of the company or of pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And then I tweeted some other stuff back at him. Just, you know, it's not that angry or anything. Just kind of just explaining everything, and he never replied. But his dad and his brothers were a big part of TBS wrestling for a long time too, in various forms. I mean, we saw more Bob on tape than we did, you know, live, although he was around a little bit in 1990. But
I saw a lot of him live at Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
Oh, that's right, you did.
Oh my God. Yeah. There were certain days he wore the mask, and there were certain days he didn't. Apparently, if he thought he was having a bad hair day, he would wear the bullet mask. That's what Jim Cornette said. Yeah.
So he's like Kowalski.
Yeah, you know.
But wait, was he wearing a wig or just is
no? I don't think it was a wig. Who wore wigs? I mean, Bruno and Kowalski are the two egregious ones.
Rod Price, Ace Starling.
Well, no, there's a difference between a wig and a weave.
Okay, so what are we? Okay, so those are weaves, right? Bruno and Kowalski were wigs.
Bruno had the flat wig with kind of like a beetle mop top thing, and then he had the perm, which is my favorite one.
Although, actually, I think I read somewhere that Bruno actually did have it. Maybe it wasn't quite a weave, but it was sort of in there.
You know, Triple H should get those and put those in frames and put those in his office next to those title belts. Here's Walter's wig and here's Bruno's wig. Did Lawler ever wear a wig? There are pictures of Lawler. I mean, I assume it's his hair, but there are pictures of him where.
You mean when he had the perm?
Well, but even after that, I've never seen anyone with that style of hair, I guess. I don't know.
From when? I mean, he has plugs.
Yeah, no, but I'm not talking about now. I'm talking in the 80s.
So are we talking pre or post hair when he had the hair match?
I'm talking pre-hair, but yeah, then again, he had the hair match, so that kind of defeats the idea that it would be a wig.
Right, when he got the bad Bruce Willis haircut.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just trying to think. I mean, you're right. You really don't see that exact style of hair on a lot of people, even back then. Like your classic, like early '80s Jerry Lawler haircut.
Yeah, it's bizarre
because it looks like a weirdly cropped, like almost like if one of the Beatles got like a really short haircut, almost.
Yeah. I guess.
I mean, I don't know when he would have started losing his hair then. Because he didn't get the plugs until that recently, like 15 years ago or so, maybe even less.
Okay, well, listen, if anyone out there in the listening audience can think of other wrestlers who have worn wigs, please tweet David Bix. But here's another question. How many wrestlers have had facelifts?
Okay. Lawler, are we counting other similar, like, eye lifts and stuff in there?
I guess so.
Because, like, JJ, I think, had an eye lift.
Really?
I thought you've read his book, haven't you?
I did. I don't remember the part about plastic.
Well, that's why JJ has looked the same for the last 25 years.
The eye lift. That's all it took.
Was when they did that angle where he had the black eyes from Dusty. That was when he got the eye lift.
Wow. So far back.
That's 87, like 87, right?
Yeah. I see Flair, and I'm like, why did you do it?
Oh, because he was starting to look a lot older when he got it, so I get why he did it. But in the long run, it was a very bad idea.
Yeah.
Like, when his hair started to go, that was the thing. Before his hair started to fall out, I think the facelift looked fine. When his hair started to fall out, like all of a sudden in TNA, that was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Because if you look back right before he got that facelift, because they did it with the angle at Fall Brawl in 97, he really is starting to look old, and really older than he actually was. Because you'd occasionally hear jokes about, Ric Flair 60 or whatever back then when he wasn't even 50 yet, right?
Right.
And
what was he? He was 40 in 89?
Yeah, if he was 40 and 80, yeah, so he's like 48. Yeah, and then he had the Spikes haircut briefly later on after that.
Oh, God, yeah.
After Russo got to shave his head. Oh, God.
That's amazing. That guy keeps his hair for all those years, and the person who gets to do it is Russo.
Yeah, and then his hair just suddenly falls out when in his early 60s, and he looks like Frankenstein.
There's only so much peroxide the body can take.
I guess, but it's kind of amazing that it took so long for a guy who's been, dyeing his hair since 1974?
74, 75, somewhere in there, yeah.
So with TBS,
back to TBS.
Well, this is how this show is always going to be. We just need some jumping off points. Black Saturday, because it can't have the same impact to us as it did to other people. Even acknowledging that WWF wrestling was never really that good for a long time. When did you first hear about it and get to see the show? I know I heard about it long before I ever saw it.
Yeah, me too. I heard about it. I feel like that's something I saw in the Apter magazines. Mm-hmm. And then once I started reading the Observer, whatever brought it up, it came up, and I then really found out about it. I didn't get to see it. I don't think until maybe the mid 2000s, or I don't know. How do you describe 2005 ish, the middle
mid
of the
2000 or aughts or
mid aughts. I hate aughts, but we'll call it that. I think somewhere in there is where I first saw it.
So wait, is it possible that you first saw it when it was on Classics on Demand?
Yes, it's possible.
It's really kind of uneventful. I mean, it's interesting to see Vince in front of the Georgia Championship Wrestling backdrop, and
it's interesting to see Freddie Miller hoping that he keeps his job. Is what it's interesting.
Which he did, and he even stuck around past the end of them being on TBS.
That's right.
Which people don't really remember. And then, although I think he left and came back because, or no, wait, or was it earlier? I'm trying to remember. No. I think it wasn't that long because I'm trying to remember because he went to the new All South that Ann Gunkel started. And that was not right. That was right after I think they left TBS, but I think he might have come back. But he also, he did on TBS work for them too. And
not a wrestler, but I think Freddie may be in the Wig Club.
Probably. What about Cal Rudman?
Oh my God.
That's just oh my God. Even if you're not talking about his hair.
Yeah, Cal Rudman. Where do you start with him? If you only know him as this goofy wrestling personality,
you don't know about all the other stuff. Right?
Yeah, read the book Hitmen by I think Frederick Dannon. It's about the history of the music industry, or the music industry's relationship with the underworld. Some amazing characters like Morris Levy, and Cal Rudman's one of the characters in there. So he's not just like this goofy guy fawning over Don Morocco. He's actually this like killer in the music business. Not killer, but you know, he's a big shot.
Yeah, because you were talking about shady people, so you got to be a little careful.
Right.
And then to me, as someone who wasn't around then, from like a tape watching perspective, I think the WWF TBS studio shows are more interesting than Black Saturday.
Right. I mean, they even had Mr. T in the studio, right before WrestleMania. Yeah. Yeah,
because it was really just the last month that they did the studio shows. When it was just the kind of this lame duck thing, we're staying on here until WrestleMania, and then we're selling this to Crockett for the $1 million that Vince thinks he will choke on.
When did he decide? When did he know he was selling to Crockett in terms of, you know, we know when they went off the air, but what was the time difference between when he knew he was going to sell to Crockett, when he sold to Crockett, and when he was off the air?
I would guess when he moved the shows into the TBS studio, because he had been so resistant to that if he knew he was selling, it's like, okay, I'll do it for a month.
Okay.
I can't remember if I've ever heard it, but I feel like that makes the most sense.
What was the main event of the first WWF on TBS? Bobo Brazil versus Big John Studd?
Yes, from the Spectrum.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine going from even 1984 Georgia to that?
That's so bad. I think that I remember there was an interview with Alexis Smirnoff.
Who not only wasn't pushed, but was barely even on TV.
Right.
I mean, he was just a guy who would really... I mean, did he even tour, or was he just on California shows?
I think he toured. Okay. I think he did. Yeah.
And I love those shows, though, because the famous, Crockett TBS era set was actually something that Vince introduced.
Right.
With the WWF logo.
I was thinking about that recently. Even the graphics package that was used during those Crockett years to show the upcoming NWA events, that package, that graphics package, was on WWF Championship Wrestling, showing with Freddie Miller's voice, saying, the stars of World Wrestling Federation are coming to these areas and facilities with action.
Be there.
And that was the exact same music and graphics that was used by Crockett. So that is fascinating that he didn't just get the time spot. He got the set and the music and the graphics.
Yeah, and also, just other things. It's Vince, so they decided to squeeze a 20 by 20 ring into the studio. If you watch those shows, the ring takes up almost the entire studio. It's just very weird, but it's fun to see guys like Steamboat, and I mean even guys who had been there before, like Bundy, and just all the and then Hogan and T in that setting, and Gorilla.
When he was recording in that studio, and Vince was recording in the TBS studio, was Ole's Championship Wrestling from Georgia also recording in that studio, or were they recording somewhere else?
Yes, but not on the same day.
Okay.
Well, I would think not on the same day because they use different rings.
Right.
Yeah. Because it was only the first couple of weeks of the Ole promotion that they didn't record at TBS, I think. Because Dick Bourne's site has a whole thing about that. Because they did, I think all the stuff that aired on TBS, though, was shot at the studio. But they did, one local show for Macon Television, or one taping that was at the studio of the Macon station. Which I think a little bit of that is on YouTube. But I know, for people who haven't ever seen it, though, that WWF studio stuff is definitely fun to watch. And then now we're talking about this in good timing in that... I almost said Classics on Demand, WWE Network, finally putting up a lot of World Championship Wrestling on TBS shows. I don't think it's complete. I think they are skipping over shows in classic WWE Network fashion, but they put up a lot from 85 to 87 the last couple of days. Unless it's everything. I haven't really looked.
Yeah, I hate to nitpick, but Vince has a lot of money. And it drives me crazy for those shows, and even his own old shows, that he won't just license or get the rights to use the original music.
Okay, I'll ask you this, because this is sort of your wheelhouse, or maybe completely, because I've never really talked to you about this. How much does it actually cost?
I can't say because not every song is the same price. Everything's a little different. But the point is, it's not going to break the bank. It's certainly not going to break the bank.
Well, on the scale of the WWE Network, probably not. Like for a DVD release, maybe.
Maybe. But maybe not. I mean, depends how you frame it. If you can convince a band who hasn't sold many copies of a certain song, hey, look, this is a promotional thing. We'll put a plug for your album on here. We'll put, music on the screen, whatever. And then there's something to do there. But he doesn't use that. I mean, look, with the Midnight Express, the music is such a big part of the presentation. I always thought the Midnight Express were the perfect TBS studio act because Cornette would be at the desk with Crockett and Shivani, and he was great. And he would cue the team and the music would kick in, and then they'd be in the ring, and him and Bobby Eaton would go back and forth between the ring and the desk, and he would do running commentary. I thought they were the perfect TBS act.
Absolutely.
And even with that, okay, look, if you're going to say that it's impossible to license the rights to use a Giorgio Moroder track, I can believe that somewhat because he made a lot of money and his songs are really big songs.
And I think I know where you're going with this, though.
But there's a second version that was commissioned by Crockett Promotions because they didn't want to run into that problem. And I would assume that because the WWE uses the faux Iron Man that the Road Warriors came out with.
They do use that?
Stuff. Yeah, I've heard that on stuff. So you're using that. Why not use the faux Midnight Express?
So wait, was that commissioned by Crockett? That was not a production song?
Jim Cornette told me, because I asked him about it. Because I told him, I said, one day I was talking to him, I said, I think you guys, I said what I said to you. You guys were the perfect TBS act. And he was like, well, we had Flair and we had the Road Warriors. I said, no. I think you guys are the best TBS act. And I love when you would do the intro and they would come out and everything. And sometimes there was that alternate version. And I liked it because you would intro them and you say, ladies and gentlemen, here they are. And then that alternate version had like this bass drum intro. It was like boom, 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 boom.
Yes.
And then it would come in. And he was like, I hated that. I hated that so much. They made me start using that. They made the song because they were afraid Giorgio Moroder would sue us for using Midnight Express. But sometimes, according to him, he said sometimes I would switch the tapes without telling them, and they didn't know any better.
I think where did he write? I think he wrote about that in Fighting Spirit or something recently because I remember, I don't think it was you that told me about this, but I remember him reading about switching the tape. And because he also mentioned how some fans prefer the knockoff, which is true.
Yeah, I like the drum intro. I'm a little corny. Although the original one's great. The original one was the one that you were introduced to the Midnight Express with. It was also the theme to Randy Poffo's or the Poffo family's ICW promotion, and it's just a killer track. Drive around to that at midnight or in the middle of the night. It'll get you where you need to go.
Is now a good time to mention, although we weren't sure if we were going to I won't outright say what it is, but our theme song is a Giorgio Moroder mixed song, I believe. And should we not say what it is and see if anyone can figure out what it is? Because it is a remix.
If you can figure out what it is, tweet at David Bix. I repeat, at David Bix. And if you get the correct answer, you will win one of his Sheedy Awards.
If I win?
You'll win. Come on.
Well, and I think we have a good shot at Best Podcast.
You're up. Well, let me tell you, you're up for 4 awards. Best podcast, I would vote for that. I think Between the Sheets is really good. Despite the fact that between the song Between the Sheets and the name of the show Between the Sheets, I have a tough time thinking that anyone who isn't a wrestling fan and understands what the concept is, they would find that podcast and think it's about 70s porn. It's called Between the Sheets. This is the music, but you guys do a great job.
Well, I think it turned out that there was also a porn podcast called Between the Sheets.
Really?
Yeah, someone told me that. I didn't look.
Maybe you should change the name to Under the Covers.
That's not going to work either. So where were we? Oh, so as far as
where were we is right.
I mean, we were actually on point though with something. But how did we? What were we talking about before the Midnight? We were talking about entrance music and stuff and licensing. I
was on point with a lot of things. Let me just.
And that was for me. That's a big part of why WCW in '89 is so great too, because all of a sudden they either were paying or didn't care, and had all those great songs.
You know, it's easy to dismiss it, but the music really meant a lot. You know, Hulk Hogan would have been Hulk Hogan no matter what. But coming out to Eye of the Tiger when he came out to Eye of the Tiger put it over the top. I recently watched, because I'm a sadomasochist, every episode of WWF Championship Wrestling from 1985.
Well, at least it wasn't All-Star Wrestling.
No, I couldn't do that. But Championship Wrestling, which I actually enjoyed. And Junkyard Dog was probably on that show more than anyone else in 1985. And by far, he got the biggest pops week in and week out in Poughkeepsie. As soon as Another One Bites the Dust would hit, the place would go apeshit.
Same thing in Mid-South.
Yeah, but as soon as he switched to Grab Them Cakes at the end of 85, noticeable difference in the pop. Noticeable difference. You know, Rick Steamboat. When Rick Steamboat came out to Sirius by the Alan Parsons Group, that was just perfect.
Right.
And then after that, it was just Rick Steamboat had some of the worst theme music ever. That one off the WCW Slam Jam album,
Family Man.
How would anyone cheer? Whose idea was that was a good song for a wrestler to come out to? Maybe Michael Hayes, now that I think about it. But that is the worst. He's got lots of values. He's a family man, loves his wife and son, and does the best he can. Like, what the fuck? What is that?
She'll try to keep him from using the name he was famous with, Ricky Steamboat the Dragon.
Well, what was the deal with that? Bonnie, he gave her the rights to it, or she sued when they got divorced for the rights to the name?
It might have even been after the divorce. When did they get divorced? If it had happened and there was this whole to-do, and that was why for a while he wouldn't, like in public or whatever, he wasn't Ricky Steamboat.
He was just Rick?
I'm trying to remember. Or was it or he just wasn't doing stuff in public as a wrestling person? So whenever he was in Ring of Honor or whatever, that's not when it was. But
okay.
I think he was refraining from doing stuff because of that. But now he does own the name again.
Okay, that's good.
And it's with that, so with that other entrance, but that whole year in WCW in '89, you've got Samoan SWAT team coming out to the theme from Halloween. Why do I pronounce that so weird? I pronounce Lex it like Luger. It's spelled in England. But
Lex Luger had the coolest music back then,
which is a production song though.
Yeah, it was awesome though. It was just perfect.
Turner had really good production music that they had access to. They picked some very good stuff in WCW during like that 89 to 91 period.
Yeah.
So that was something that never should have changed. They should have brought back that song when he came back instead of the WWF Superstar Line song.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah,
the Steiners had Welcome to the Jungle.
Yep, which was perfect and ended up being associated with them for a long time, and they used it in ECW, and then it became the big overused indie entrance music for everyone, from Cheetah Master to whoever.
You know what song? I'm going to jump in here. We talked about Bob Armstrong before and all the times I got to see him live. I want to say one of the songs I've always hated as a wrestling theme song is Bad to the Bone. There's something just so corny about it. And he did it. And obviously the dynamic duo of Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez did it. And of course they were even worse because in their promos, they would at the same time in sync turn to the camera and say, "We're bad to the bone," which is just so
Wouldn't they actually do the bad sometimes too?
Maybe. I don't remember. I don't remember. But I hate that song.
Bad to the Bone and Born to be Wild.
I don't think Born to be Wild is anywhere near as bad a theme song as Bad to the Bone.
I just remember though when Cactus Jack used in ECW how much I hated it.
Okay.
I just didn't think it worked.
I'm not going to put that on the same list.
Okay. But
Bad to the Bone, Ricky Steamboat Family Man. Trying to think what else I would put on
but
it.
as far as commercial music though, I mean those are two different categories though.
Yeah, I'm combining the categories. I'm making new rules for our new podcast, the Superpodcast.
There are rules.
There are rules at 6:05. It's funny, in '85 there was like a 2-week period where Paul Orndorff, when he first turned babyface, came out to like I forget the name of the song and I forget the band that played it, but he came out to like a theme song and the place went crazy, and then they got rid of it right away.
It's probably somewhere on historyofwwe.com if you look at the 85 results. Like there's some weird stuff. Like my favorite is, I think it was just one TV taping, Greg Valentine coming out to Turn Up the Radio by Autograph.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Why is a heel coming out to that?
There's lots of great stuff.
Especially Greg Valentine.
How about King Kong Bundy coming out in sunglasses and a cape?
I love King Kong Bundy's cape. And then WCW '89. I mean, it didn't even finish his list. You had Eddie Gilbert and at first the Steiners, before they switched to Welcome to the Jungle, coming out to Hot Stuff again. Brian Pillman to Rocket by Def Leppard, which I thought was great. So many of them. Even Wipeout for Dynamic Dudes. Oh, Terry Funk, though, probably had the best one, which was Man with the Harmonica from the what's the soundtrack? Once Upon a Time in the West.
I didn't know that. I actually had no memory of that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that one's really good. And
want to talk about bad ones? I hated Terry Funk coming out to Desperado. Terry Funk's maybe my favorite wrestler.
Maybe the one time at Barely Legal.
Nah, I was there
as a thing, but
no.
Okay.
It's just so lame. It's so lame. It's just so fucking lame. And I hated when he would come out to that. Okay. And I saw on the Memphis thing, or not Memphis, but the recent match he had with Lawler, and they had the interview beforehand with Dave Brown and Lance Russell, and they bring out Terry Funk, who's still doing his heel thing, and it was great seeing him and Lance.
And then he comes out to Desperado.
And he comes out to Desperado. I'm like, why? He's a heel. Here, at least.
I'm guessing Bert Prentice has never watched Seinfeld and doesn't understand what a lot of people think of that song with now.
Well, if Colorado Kid was on Seinfeld, he would have watched Seinfeld. Anyway, TBS Wrestling.
I don't know. I think we're done with TBS. I mean, we're almost an hour, and so why would I mention before we move on that I have my thing with luchashop.com and
my
thing, yes. Which I guess we've got Black Friday coming up. I guess the day after this comes out, and the whole Christmas. What is up with me? Christmas, Hanukkah shopping season. Kwanzaa, general winter solstice holidays. And if you want to buy all of your finest Lucha Libre merchandise, all officially licensed, you go to luchashop.com. You can use the coupon code BIX for 10% off your whole order. Everything, masks, shirts. You've got your official Ingobernables shirts, including Tetsuya Naito for the New Japan fans. Lots of officially licensed Rey Mysterio merchandise now. All sorts of good stuff. Chris Zellner, my esteemed co-host on Between the Sheets, used it to pick up I forget if it was a Sombra shirt or a Rush shirt, because I think I almost said El Sombra, La Sombra shirts, because he went to WWE, but rest of the Ingobernables, all sorts of other cool stuff there. So luchashop.com, coupon code BIX. I guess we were going to move on next to talking about Terry Funk.
Yeah, I know that you recently wrote a story in Fighting Spirit about a Terry Funk experience you had, which it seems that everyone, according to you, knew this story. I had never heard it before, and I found it hysterical.
Okay. Well, the article, it was just an article about Terry Funk in general, because December is both the 50th anniversary of his pro debut and the 40th anniversary of him beating Jack Briscoe for the NWA title. And I talked to him, and I also talked to Jerry Briscoe for the article, and when me and Brian Elliott were talking about the article, we agreed we should do something as like a sidebar about my Terry Funk story. I would ask him about it. And that you have to read the new Fighting Spirit, which is out now, to find out what he said. And the best way to get it is through Pocket Mags. I believe it's tinyurl/pocketfsm if you just want a shortcut. But if you just go to Pocket Mags and search for Fighting Spirit Magazine, you'll find it. Or if you search on Newsstand on the on iOS, and I think also the Newsstand app on Android. But Pocket Mags is good because it's the same. It's all through them, and if you sign up through them, you can read it on every device. So I did this article about Terry Funk, and we had the sidebar, which you have to. I'm sorry, it's late. Crap. Should I just start again? You know what?
Yeah, blame the lateness. That's really what the problem is here.
No, it's not my Jewiness.
I'm Jewish.
Yeah, but I'm Jewier than you.
What the hell does that mean? How are you Jewier than me?
I don't know.
Yeah, you can't even explain that. I have the Jewish Book of Why in my library. Do you have that?
No.
I got it from Rabbi Kligfeld.
Which synagogue was that?
That was Temple Emmanuel.
Okay. Oh, wait. who was Rabbi? So that
No one cares. What are we doing? Anyway, there's a sidebar.
So you have to find out. Yes, to find out what Terry Funk said about this, you have to read Fighting Spirits. So I met Terry Funk for the first time in 1993 at one of John Arezzi's Weekend of Champions conventions, which were the original wrestling fan conventions, autograph things, etc., like we have tons of now. The convention guests in that room, because you have your convention guests and your vendor guests, included Terry Funk that year, and very eclectic group of guests. This is the last one, 1993, because you also had, trying to remember, Kevin Sullivan.
I was there too, and that was where I first met Terry Funk.
Okay, so it was
Sherry Martel, Conan, Medusa, Kevin Sullivan, and Woman.
Sabu the Sheik.
Sabu and the Sheik, and it was billed as the only autograph session the Sheik ever did in the United States.
Which is probably true.
Right. I actually just recently on eBay sold my autograph of the Sheik from that event.
I'm trying to remember. You told me, but how much did you get for it?
I don't remember. It was a lot, though.
It was well over 50. I remember that.
Oh, it was well over 50. And like I said, it was rare. Who has an autograph 8x10 of the Sheik?
Anyway, so I meet Terry Funk, and I'm precocious. I'm 8, almost 9 years old, and I just remember he was funny. He was very nice, and he signed the autograph, which I had for a long time. Stay out of jail, Terry Funk. Fast forward almost 10 years. I'm at Jersey All Pro Wrestling show that had a Lawler Funk main event, which was the first match of their touring indie matches that they had in 2003, 2004. And I brought with me an All Japan program that I had with Funk for him to sign, because I didn't have the old autograph anymore, which is a whole other story that I think is also in the article. And before the show, though, he's walking along the back wall where I was sitting with the people who I went to the show with. He's shaking everyone's hand, very nice, hello, blah, blah, blah. Shakes my hand, walks past me, stops, turns around. So, did you stay out of jail? I know that was a terrible Terry Funk, but I had to.
Hey, no one could do a worse Terry Funk than Jim Ross. I stopped listening to his podcast. That was one of the reasons.
You can skip the whatchamacallit, the ads. He only does them during the ads now, I think, the impressions.
I just want to say slow it down. Slow it down. Just because you've slowed down doesn't mean everyone else needs to slow down.
So anyway, I figured that would be a good jumping off point to talk about Terry Funk a little bit, because you also had your own Terry Funk experiences, because you went to the 50 Years of Funk show in Amarillo in 97, and you went to the barbecue at his ranch after, so...
Yeah, Terry was awesome. I met him when I was 13 at the same convention you did, and he, when I sat down, I was a little nervous, because I knew him as this psycho heel from WCW a few years earlier. And he right away put me at ease. He put on this whole little show for me. He was like, hold on, Brian, I got to move my soda. I got to move this. He starts throwing papers in the air and everything. And then we're about to take the picture. I got a little Polaroid with him. And he said, oh, no, we got to pose. And he started putting his fists up and trying to get me to pose with him. And he was just so cool. And he signed an autograph to me. He didn't tell me to stay out of prison, probably because I'm a little more, Jewishy than you. He wrote,
that's going to be an ongoing battle.
Yeah, and I'll win. He wrote, Dear Brian, best to you and the family, Terry Funk. Which is funny considering now that I know your story about you. And then trying to think when I next saw him and talked to him, but all I know is somewhere around 96, I got his phone number. And I started calling him up at home. And he was perfectly willing to talk to me. And I would just have these long conversations with him about everything. I would just pick his brain about everything. And, usually he would be chewing his tobacco. And he was completely willing to talk to me until I had to get off the phone. And I have some recordings somewhere. I ended up saying, hey, can I interview you? Can I ask you questions? And I recorded some of them. I have that tape somewhere with some of my other old interviews with people from back then, which are interesting. And so I would do that. I would talk to him on a fairly regular basis for a little while. And then in 1997, in September of 97, the day or the day after Fritz von Erich died, and I know that because I had to switch planes in Dallas to fly to Amarillo, and the Dallas newspapers were all there, and Fritz von Erich death coverage was in the paper. He had just died. And I went to Amarillo, got to see the 50 Years of Funk show, which was purported at various times as being Terry's retirement, and then it was Terry's retirement in Amarillo. It was all sorts of different things. And I got to see what I thought was a Amazing match with Bret Hart. And then the next day we went over to his ranch, and there were, all the wrestlers were there, and my little crew was included Bob Barnett and Harry White. Harry White being another notorious wrestling fan, good guy.
And Bob has that great video where he's trying to shoot video as Terry's daughter keeps saying, "No video, please."
The coolest video Bob has, I don't know how many people have seen this. Bob was one day filming a show in California. I want to say it was Sabu versus Al Snow.
The where was it? Fullerton, the Dan Farron show where Terry runs in and hides under a car and.
Yeah, Terry wasn't even on the show. It was it was a tiny show. There may have been 100 people there at the most.
It looked like a garage.
Yeah, and all of a sudden in the middle of the show, Terry Funk runs in California, and Bob's filming, and then Terry starts chasing Bob around, and you hear people yelling, "Barnett, you better get the hell out of there!" And then the next thing you know, Terry Funk is in the parking lot outside, hiding under a car. Go to Bob Barnett. I don't know what his website is now.
I don't know if he even has the website anymore.
Whatever, find him. He's on something. He's on something. Just put Bob Barnett in Google and it'll come up. And ask him for this video. It's one of the great videos of all time of Terry Funk.
I'm not sure I've ever seen the whole thing now that I think about it.
It was a great match, and then all of a sudden the Terry Funk run-in happens. And again, he wasn't booked on the show. The show was nowhere near where he lived. It was just so random. And he was just so insane in that moment. He was perfect Terry Funk in that moment. But anyway, I went to his ranch. He was really cool. Got to hang out with him there. And then I would see him here and there at different things. When I would go to ECW shows, I would see him. I had friends who were friends with him. So, usually we were around the same group of people. And then I didn't see him for a number of years. And I was at a Ring of Honor show hanging out with Jim and Stacy Cornett. And they told me, "We got a problem. We need to get Terry Funk to the arena. And do you know someone?" I said, "Yeah, I got the perfect guy." I called my cousin, who's from the rock band Highway Gimps. They're no longer together, but a fairly notorious band in Brooklyn. And my cousin, I said, "Listen, Terry Funk needs someone to escort him from his hotel to the arena." And he said, "Okay, no problem." Because my cousin was never a big wrestling fan, but he always got a kick out of Terry Funk when I would force him. He was younger than me, so he had no choice. I would show him Terry Funk and wouldn't let him say no. And he went to the hotel. I forget there was a Marriott. I think it's the Marriott. There's a Marriott on one side of the street and a Marriott on the other side of the street. And he went to the wrong Marriott. And Terry's calling up "Where are you? I can't find you." And my cousin gets over there. My cousin gets Terry in a cab. My cousin gets Terry over to the show. And I haven't seen Terry since I was 17 or 18. And Terry gets out of the car. He comes right over to me and he goes, "Brian, it's so good to see you." I'm like, how in the world? It seems that he has this super memory that apparently, if you read the Fighting Spirit magazine, big sidebar, he denies his super memory. But he had some sort of super memory that he instantly remembered who I was. I thought there's no way Terry's going to remember me from being a teenager to being now in my 30s. And right away he did. And yeah, there's 5 or 6, so let's say 5, I would say are my very favorite wrestlers. And Terry Funk's right at the top. Everything he's ever done is just so amazing and so perfect.
Mm-hmm. And also, by the way, the article has some great photos, I believe, all from our friend Pete Lederberg.
Oh.
Some of that great Florida stuff that he has, including the one of those photos of Terry with the cornrows.
Isn't it Lederberg?
I think I always go with Lederberg because I think isn't Lederberg what Lance says in the Tag Team of the Year angle?
I thought he said Lederberg. I'm pretty sure his name was Lederberg, although now you have me doubting everything.
Okay, well, we'll talk to him about it then. So what else do we have to say as far as Terry Funk, or to use Terry Funk to jump off to something else? I wanted to ask you about the stuff at the ranch, though. So, was that a thing fans were invited to? What exactly was the deal with that? I've never heard exactly what the situation was with that whole thing.
It was a long time ago. It was 1997. I'm trying to remember exactly. I think it was something where, I don't even remember if it was in the Observer, but somehow we knew that, if you were smart and coming from out of town, Terry would let you come to the ranch. And in my car, Bob Barnett rented a car. And it was me, Bob, Harry White, and Scott Cornish, another great friend of mine. And I remember specifically Bob wouldn't take Mike Lano, who somehow found another way there. And it was like us and all the ECW guys and the Romeros, and it was really cool. There were a lot of bugs, I remember, but it's a ranch. What do you expect? And yeah, it was really, really cool. The night before, we went to some local bar in Amarillo after the matches. We were told this is where everyone's hanging out.
That sounds like an adventure.
It was like a real Amarillo dive bar, as you can imagine. And the one thing I'll never forget is there was a good Japanese contingent who came over for this because Terry Funk is a big deal over there. Arguably, I don't know, top 3 in terms of American wrestlers, popular, who had amazing popularity in Japan. Maybe Stan Hansen, him, and I don't know. You could argue Bruiser Brody or the Destroyer or a few other people. And there was a big Japanese contingent. And as my little crew was leaving the bar that night, we turned around and I don't know what everyone was drinking, but all these big, rough and tough cowboys were slow dancing with some of the Japanese men who came over. And it's like one of those images that's like, what is going on here? I guess it's the right time to leave. Yeah, it was a cool trip. There was another fan there who was somewhat obsessed with Bret Hart. I don't want to say his name because he was out there. He was a nice guy. It was the only time I ever met him. But this guy walked around everywhere with photo albums filled with Bret Hart photos.
Okay, wait. I am me who it is, though, so I know who this is.
I'm an IMU. I only know his first name. Okay. I don't remember his last name. I just IM'd it to you.
Okay.
Let me know if there's some sort of notorious internet stories about
I don't think so.
This guy showed up obsessed with Bret Hart, wore his leather jacket all around, had these Bret Hart photo albums. He took them everywhere. When we went to the Waffle House, he showed up with his photo albums. They weren't going to leave his side. And when we got to the arena that night for the show, to my horror, I think I was in the second row. He was next to me. And I said, no way. And I regret this. He knows I did it. I admitted it to him. I switched my seat with Harry White. And Harry White had to sit next to this guy who also, I don't know, may have smelled a little bit. And that whole night, he kept holding up a Canadian flag the whole night. And it would block Harry's view. And, I really feel bad about that. But yeah, the fan whose name I won't say, who was obsessed with Bret Hart. That's another one of those memories from that.
And John Lister was there too. And I remember when he put together his book Slamthology, that was a collection of different stuff he had written for British magazines and British newsletters and stuff. One of them was his travel diary for that trip. And for some reason, the thing that always sticks out for me is at the ranch. So if you remember any British guys, it was probably John and his friends. That when Stu Hart was holding court and telling stories, that Rob Van Dam's taking it all in and is just repeatedly acting like, hey, Stu, I was trained by the Sheik, by the way, I was trained by the Sheik.
I don't remember that.
I've never asked John this, but the other thing that sticks out is when he's describing all of the stories that Stu Hart told. One of them was about, and I quote, the hairiest pussy in all of Canada.
Angelo Mosca? No. I kid. The day I got there was a huge Hart family contingent. That's my word of the day. There was Bruce Hart and Ross Hart and Stu Hart, and Bret wasn't really with them. Bret was out doing whatever Bret does. And he was supposed to be there, but he was just late. Maybe he found the hairiest pussy in all of Canada. You never know. But I ended up talking to Stu, and, Stu was like in a wheelchair, and, Stu's not in the best of moments. I guess Stu wasn't very easy to understand. And I just said, hey, I'm from Long Beach, New York. And he lit up and wouldn't let go of me. He kept talking to me because our hometown, the hometown me and Bix are from, is the place where Stu met Helen Hart. Helen Hart was Helen Smith, and the Smith family was a prominent family in our hometown for many years. When the Historical Society would put out different booklets and pamphlets through the years, there'd be pictures of a teenage Helen Hart in a bathing suit on the beach. And funny enough, the chief of lifeguards at that time was Paul Bosch, the famed Houston promoter. So I talked to Stu about that. And I remember, I hate to say this, and who knows what would have happened. It probably wouldn't have. But I kept thinking, I've heard stories about this guy. If he tries to put me in a headlock or something, he's an old man. I'm going to punch him in the fucking face. But, nothing happened. And the other thing I did was I talked to Ross Hart, who was really cool. He seemed really...
Ross is a really nice guy, yes.
Yeah, very knowledgeable about history. And around that time, I mentioned that there were wrestlers I would talk to frequently and interview and stuff. One of them was Wayne St. Wayne. Wayne was... I have one of Wayne's paintings in my house. Wayne would take acid and make these amazing wrestling paintings. Apparently, he still does. Wayne was a wrestler. He wrestled as Dr. Blood. He wrestled as Buddy Frankenstein. He wrestled as Mike Hammer. And one of the places he spent time, I believe he spent the most time, was in the Calgary territory. And Wayne had some of the most amazing stories you've ever heard. And he would tell these like somewhat disgusting stories at times.
Well, it's Calgary. It's to be expected. Well,
there was one story called The Condom in the Condiment, where he would go to the arenas and just drape a condom in the relish, at the arena where people would go. And there was another one. I always loved this story where he would have sex with a woman he met, and he would turn out the lights, and on each thrust he would hit his head against the headboard, and the lights are out. And after he had arrived, as I'll say, he would blade himself, so that when the lights went back on, there would be just blood everywhere and the girl would freak out. Wayne had wild stories. And I said to Ross, I said, hey, I know someone who used to work for you guys. And he was like, oh, who? I said, Wayne St. Wayne, Mike Hammer. And right away he said, oh, the degenerate, the biggest degenerate we ever had work for us was Wayne St. Wayne. So, yeah, Wayne's still out there somewhere. He was always a funny guy.
Yeah, you're going to need to tweet the photo of the Dick the Bruiser painting again.
I tweeted it a few weeks ago, so it's just.
I'll find it.
I don't tweet much, so it should actively be on my.
Okay. Yes, it should be easy to find then, because it's actually a very good painting.
I love this painting. I hang it up in the living room everywhere.
Could you imagine though in Calgary with the ribs they had there, how bad someone has to be for a Hart to call him a degenerate?
Dynamite Kid's shooting people up with milk, and they're calling this guy the degenerate. In another world, they would have married him off to one of their daughters.
In the New Observer, little brief note in here and there about Ole Olsen passing away, and Dave talks about how he wasn't in Calgary long because he got ribbed out of the territory. So this is the type of place we're talking about, and Calgary ribs were different.
Ole Olsen, Ole Anderson. What the hell kind of a name is Ole?
Well, especially for at least for I forgot now. I'd have to look back again what Ole Olsen's real first name was, but Ole Anderson's real name is Alan. I mean, why? Where does Ole come from?
Right. I mean, I hate to admit this, but it took me years to realize Arn Anderson is just it's short for Arnold. Like I never thought of that until recently.
Right. Although wouldn't Flair and Ole occasionally call him Arnold?
I don't remember that. Maybe.
I know one of them would call him Arnold on promos sometimes.
Lars. That could be Larry. Gene is Gene. What the hell is Ole? And there's two Oles, Ole Olsen and Ole Anderson. There are multiple Oles in the professional wrestling business.
Of all the wrestlers to name yourself after.
Yeah.
I don't even remember. Oh, we were talking about, I guess, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to our podcast, people.
This is what this is always going to be like. Get used to it. There was something. What else was I getting? Oh, with all the Long Beach stuff though. Like recently, when I interviewed Natalia, I sent her some of the stuff I have because a while back my cousin was doing like an internship at the library. And he's just looking through the historical stuff. And this is like they're like locked up drawer of local historical stuff. Don't know why it's like that for some reason. But there was a scrapbook that Paul Bosch had sent them for like the 50th or 75th anniversary or something of Long Beach. And it was like in the 60s or 70s or something. And it's all these like great photos and clippings and stuff of mostly, Paul Bosch stuff as a lifeguard, but also stuff like the Smith family and Helen Hart and her sisters. So at least at the time, I haven't gone back to look to see if our library has a scanner or anything now, but I had to make Xerox copies to have anything. And I scanned those, and I sent it to Natalia, who appreciated it. I think she even tweeted some of it and put it on Instagram. And I mean, just interesting stuff to find.
After the Amarillo show, I had sent Stu some stuff similar from the Long Beach Historical Society of Helen, and I got a very nice letter in return. And around that same time, too, Scott Teal's Whatever Happened To newsletter did a feature on Lord James Blears. And in it, he mentions, oh, yeah, I was wrestling in New York, and I was also staying out there in Long Beach with Stu Hart and Paul Bosch and all these people. And it had his address and his phone number. So I wrote him a letter, and I got this letter back. And it was really cool. It was on Tokyo Hotel stationery. And it said, yes, I was married down the street in Oceanside at this church on this date, and we've been married this amount of years. And thanks for writing to me. Tally ho, James Blears. I was like, this is the cool. So now I say tally ho all the time. When we leave, every morning when I take the kids to school, they like, tally ho, let's go. And it's all because of Lord James Blears.
I know there's more wrestling history to our city than we realize, but have never been able to figure out how much. Like, once I went a few times, like, looking through the microfilms. Like, that's how I found the Stu and Helen Hart wedding announcement, which I think I also sent to Natty. And you'd have results from, there was this Long Beach Stadium, which is now where the housing projects are here, this outdoor stadium, and you'd find results of Stu Hart when he was here. But the most interesting one to me was finding a result of Martin Karadagian, who...
Really?
Yes. For those who don't know, was the promoter and top star of Titanes in El Ring in Argentina, which was the promotion that's said to have inspired a lot of Antonio Peña's ideas. And some people think Vince McMahon might have seen it because it was on TV in New York. A lot of wild gimmicks.
It was on TV in New York?
I think it was. I mean, you hear about it more from people who are in LA, but it did also air in New York.
Who's your favorite wrestler from that promotion?
Well, it's so tough, though, because the primary stuff does not exist on video. So it's just the movie and then the stuff from the early 80s. I know your favorite is Pibe Diaz.
El Pibe Diaz. There's a couple of videos of him. Apparently it was kind of a Razor Ramon Diesel situation where when the original Pibe Diaz left, they just got a new guy who looked nothing like the original, and he became El Pibe Diaz. But El Pibe Diaz comes out. There's a match. It's, I think, El Diablo versus El Pibe Diaz.
And this is on YouTube.
And it's on YouTube. And this guy comes out in pink overalls with like 7 women. And they're all just like dancing to the El Pibe Diaz theme song, which I believe the name of it is El Pibe Diaz. And as the women are just walking by him and getting in the ring to dance, and they're each dancing individually. There isn't like some sort of synchronized choreographed dance. They're all just like doing their own little dance, which looks funny. Pibe Diaz is meanwhile getting kissed by children at ringside. Like, boys are running up and kissing him on the cheek. And then he gets in the ring and starts doing flips and dances. And then at the end of the match, he wins. And then the music hits again, and then the girls come in again, and they all start dancing. And then the guy he beat, El Diablo, he starts dancing. And then the referee, William Boo, starts dancing as well, but that's too much. When the heel referee starts dancing, they leave, and then William Boo has a little bit of a freak out. And there's a few other matches similar with his giant group of women dancing. To me, it's the funniest thing. I've watched it too many times, to the point where I like the theme song. But El Pibe Diaz versus El Diablo. We'll put that on our blog, Bix.
Okay, yes. They were way ahead of everyone with merchandising and the music and everyone having their own entrance music. It's really impressive. Like, anyone who hasn't needs to read the Observer Hall of Fame bio for Martin Karadagian, which our friends Dr. Lucha, Steve Sims, and Kurt Brown did. Which I just check Wikipedia, whichever year it was, and then because I know it is in the archives on the site, and it's one of my favorite things I've ever read about wrestling, because it just explains all of these things, like everything from the autobiography or hagiography or whatever it was book that they put out when Karadagian was in prison called "Should This Man Be in a Cage." To the tabloid writer that discovered that La Momia was actually Gaetano Ivanov, who was like one of the prelim wrestlers. Because the La Momia, the mummy's hands were exposed. So the tabloid writer brushed by Gaetano Ivanov on a hunch with a magic marker before a big match. And then when the writer saw La Momia come out with the magic marker and they had photos to prove it, it was like, I don't know if they said fraud or exposed, whatever, but it was something like fraude. Gaetano Ivanov es La Momia. And it was this big story. And William Boo, who you mentioned, is a big cultural figure in Argentina. A bad referee call in mainstream sports in Argentina is called a William Boo call, which I love.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if Danny Davis call or something like that was a mainstream sports term?
I love that you picked Dangerous Danny Davis.
Well, who else am I going to pick for a heel ref?
Well, I guess Neil Patrick isn't going to make the cut.
Neil Patrick.
What's his name? Not Neil Patrick.
Nick Patrick. Neil Patrick is not Neil Patrick. No, Nick. Isn't Neil Patrick the name of the guy from Petland Discounts?
I don't know. I think I just confused the assassin's son with Doogie Howser. But you guys get the point. Yeah, I guess it would have to be Dangerous Danny Davis, who was suspended for life plus 10 years and then somehow was back a couple years later as a regular referee.
Mm-hmm. Is he the worst main eventer in the history of any major arena show, at least in New York for the WWF?
Did he main event?
Him versus George Steele in the steel cage at the Meadowlands.
Oh, my God.
Like in 88, maybe? I think people have looked, and there was not really anything that you could argue was the main event on that show. I mean, plus it's the 80s, and it's a cage match, so it is the main event.
Yeah. I'm having a tough time off the top of my head thinking of a worse main eventer.
At least because I was trying to figure out how you'd qualify it. Would it be any WWF major arena house show? What would it? I would think certainly in New York.
Yeah, I'm not. I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't even anywhere else. Like, depending on how you're defining worse. Like, if you want to say Crusher Verdue, sure, but that drew a sellout.
It's funny. I was thinking about this recently. Dennis Carluzzo did a show years and years ago. I think it was in Totowa, New Jersey, and there was a convention during the day and a show at night. And I was there, and somehow something happened, and the ring that was supposed to be used for the show couldn't make it. And it was like a last-minute panic, and Frank Idavia was there. And I don't even know if Jersey All-Pro was started yet. I don't think it had. He was just kind of this notorious character from the New York indie scene and New York free hotline scene as Lightning Lou Diamond. And he volunteered. He said, I have a ring. I can give you my ring. And he showed up with this ring. And first of all, just watching him and his couple of friends trying to get this ring in like the little elevator to go up to the floor was a disaster. We thought that it wasn't going to work. He finally gets the ring up there. He gets it set up. The first match, whatever it was Derek Domino and Harley Lewis, the Misfits, versus someone. I don't remember who.
Let's just say Ace Starling and Devon Storm.
Probably not. It was the opening match.
Okay.
And something happened, and Derek Domino took a bump, like on a backdrop, and a hole opened up in the ring. Like wooden planks just fell out, and it just destroyed his back. He was really in a lot of pain. And I was in the locker room after the match, and he came in the back. And for whatever reason, the first person there was George Steele. He went up to George Steele, and he goes, "Oh, man, don't take any bumps in that left corner." And George Steele said, "Son, I haven't taken a bump in 30 years." That's my lasting George Steele memory.
I mean, we're nearing the end of what we tried to settle on as our allotted time. So do we want to talk about magazines at all, or are we saving that for next time, or what should we do?
It's our first episode. We're still.
Are we allowed to go long then?
We can go long, or we can go short. I don't know. Do we want to go to? We're not going to any Chris Zellner lengths, but
no.
Yeah.
I don't know, because you said, and we went into it a little bit, that you wanted to use as a jumping off point people who, not just the names you didn't pronounce right, but kind of your conception of people you had never seen before, but were learning about in the magazines.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, who did you have in mind?
I don't know. I think I hit a home run with Magnum Ta. Greg Gagne, Vern Gagne. They were guys I read about. I'm like, who the hell are these guys?
Well, that's because it's actually pronounced Gagne. A lot of people. I mean, it's for a lot of people. I mean, there are people who have that same name. Joe Gagne, or who was the baseball player? Wasn't the baseball player also named Greg?
It was. Yeah, his name was Greg too.
Yeah, they pronounce it Gaggy.
I think he played for the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah. And of course Vern's real name was Laverne.
How great is that? I think that's maybe what started that fight in the old age home. The guy said, hey, Laverne. Don't call me that.
Hey, Vay.
I heard a story recently.
Yes.
I don't know where I heard it. Greg Gagne was interviewed somewhere, and he claims
to invented the UFC.
No, well, I mean, doesn't everyone? But he claims that his father didn't tell anyone because his father kept everything close to the vest, close to the chest, whatever the fuck the expression is. Yeah. But that the plan was that Hogan was going to have a short feud with Andre in early '84, and after he beat Andre, was going to beat Bockwinkel for the belt. That was the plan if Hogan hadn't left, that they had built it up to a point where Hogan and Andre had like some kind of like either it happened or it was about to happen. They were in a battle royal and there was a moment where it was just them and, it had that natural, standoff, even though
I think that did happen.
Yeah. And then the goal was to build towards Hogan versus Andre. And then once Hogan beat Andre, he was going to get the AWA title. I'd never heard that story before, and it's fascinating.
But did he say how they would have dealt with the Japan deal since that was the actual hold-up in Hogan getting the belt?
He didn't, that I recall.
It's Greg tells stories.
Does he have a reputation for telling? I mean, other than inventing the UFC?
Yeah, I mean, there's other stuff like he was close to a CBS deal when Vince raided them or something.
Oh, I did hear that one too. Yes,
which I don't exactly buy. If you notice, a lot of these, besides inventing the UFC, have a lot to. They all seem to center around that time frame too, that like right before Hogan left type of period. Except for inventing the UFC, unless he said he originally came up with the idea back then, which wouldn't shock me if he said that. But you know what I loved about that story too was that it wasn't just my father came up with the idea for MMA or whatever. It was my father had this idea and he pitched it at a USA wrestling meeting, and Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta happened to be there, and they stole the idea and created the UFC.
Yeah, exactly.
They kind of act well. No, they acted like they did a lot of things, but they never actually claimed to have invented the company or anything. There were a lot of things that they took credit for that they shouldn't have, and there are a lot of people that claim, like you said, there are a lot of people that claim to have invented the UFC that didn't.
Right.
And you used to work with at least one of them.
Yeah, I worked with Bob Meyerowitz for several years, including on the infamous Yama pit fighting pay-per-view event, which maybe we'll talk about one day.
Yes, which I remember you telling me I'm going to be the Dana White of Yama.
I never said that ever.
Yes, you did. You said I'm like the Dana White.
No, I didn't. Yes,
you did. I swear to God, you told me. Wait, I think didn't I mention? Yeah, didn't we have this same argument a couple months ago?
That I was the Dana White of Yama.
No, that you refused to believe you said that to me.
I don't remember ever saying that, so maybe. Although, if I'm going to play devil's advocate against myself, if Bob and Peter Kauf were the Fertittas, in terms of hierarchy, I would have been the Dana White.
Yes.
In that sense, yes.
I think that's what you meant.
But I have a full head of hair. At 35, a glorious full head of hair.
And you don't have a gambling problem. Or at least you don't get you. Well, I shouldn't say that.
No, I don't.
I shouldn't say that about him.
You should say that. I don't have a gambling problem.
Well, no, you don't have a gambling problem. Dana White doesn't have a gambling. Well, no, actually, Dana White doesn't have a gambling problem because he wins.
Oh, there you go. I'm not the Dana White of Yama. Let me just throw that out there.
No, you prefer to keep a distance. You prefer to cut. You're the Campbell McLaren of Yama.
Yeah, I guess that would be a little more fair.
Yes, all of our non-MMA fans are loving this conversation.
Yeah, sorry people.
I don't even remember what we were talking about. Is this a good time to wrap up, or was there anything else we wanted to talk about with magazines or whatever? We'll save it for next time, I guess.
There's always next week. I guess the goal for now is maybe we'll do one of these a week, see how it goes. This is as I said earlier, this was our first time doing this. This is the first time I'm using this microphone. So if there's any audio issues, we'll hear about them we'll hear them when we go back and review this. But I apologize in advance. This is something we'll attempt to fix, attempt to get in order. If there's anything wrong, please don't hesitate. Send your angry tweets to @DavidBix. He really likes hearing everyone's opinion. And that's it. Like I said, this is something where we're going to have fun with, hopefully talk about old wrestling, have some laughs, and we'll be back with you next week.
Yes.
So, Bix,
people should follow you on Twitter.
You could if you want.
Not that you tweet that much, but you're on Twitter @GreatBrianLast, and that's Brian with an I.
Every now and then I have an interesting thing to say.
Or either something interesting to say, or you find something interesting and you take a picture of
it. Yeah, don't I sound really interesting?
You have good. You've tweeted good stuff. You should tweet more.
I probably should, but I don't know.
And the at least as of this recording, the Dick the Bruiser painting was 73 days ago, and I just made sure to open the tweet, so I make sure to post it in our blog post that will have this. And yeah, if you're getting, I mean, this is not going to be on iTunes yet as we're posting it, because iTunes requires you to have at least one episode up before you submit the feed. In the meantime, if you want to subscribe to the feed, it is feeds.feedburner.com/605pod. The website is 605pod.com. I say 605pod.com, just even though people should use common sense, you never know. You say people.
And listen, we have this website that Bix created. It's beautiful. It's so gorgeous. The graphics. I mean, it's amazing the job he's done with this. What we will
was that sarcasm?
That was complete sarcasm. See, I'm more Jewishy than you.
I like how the logo came out, though.
The logo came out great.
Yes.
The Superpodcast. What we will try to do is take some of the things we've talked about today, video clips or whatever else we can find, and try to put them up on there so that if this is something that you're not familiar with or something you want to be refreshed with, it'll be right there in a very handy sort of way on a very beautiful, gorgeous, seductive website.
Yes, a very nice, plain WordPress template theme that I made sure to get your approval on.
A flying WordPress.
That's terrible.
I had a joke earlier. I'm gonna tell everyone.
Okay, great.
This is how I'll end my stay today. I don't know why I thought of this earlier, but I thought it was so funny. And it is that there would be a wrestler in Hawaii named Oahu McDaniel.
That's. I'm trying to figure out if that's better or worse than the thing John Layfield has been doing on commentary, which was. Now I'm it's where he talks about Xavier Woods playing the trombone with New Day, and he says something about, like, I forget what even the joke he's making, the construct of it is, but he keeps saying, and he's been trying to get it to work, and it never does, Chief J trombone.
Let me tell you, I said earlier that I'd like to see Matt Stryker have his vocal cords ripped out. I would like to see JBL just shot in the head on live TV. I mean it. On Monday Night Raw, I don't want to see him just lose his voice. I just want to see him go away for good. He is awful. He is the worst. He is so bad. And what makes it even worse is that you know that Vince enjoys it, that Vince likes it.
Well, and that he was good for a while.
He was never good. He sucks.
He was pretty good at first.
I don't think so.
We're talking almost a decade ago, but he was good.
I won't concede this point.
You were not a fan of John Layfield on SmackDown?
I have a belief, and I intend to maintain it, that he was never good, even on SmackDown.
Okay. Yeah, whatever you say, Maggle.
Maggle! Hey! Look at Maggle! Hey!
Maggle Ta.
Oh, Maggle Ta! Oh, just everything in that voice and everything he says, and it's so stupid. And him and Michael Cole together are atrocious. And then you add that third idiot in there, and it's just completely unlistenable to. No one talks the way anyone talks, whether it's in an interview segment or whether it's on the commentary. The commentary is so counterproductive that it's astounding. I cannot watch it. I've given up. I tried to watch again this week. I lasted 15 minutes.
Well, so you did not get to win the World Television title then?
What?
That was a terrible joke. I'm sorry.
Oh, because of the time limit?
Yeah, the 15-minute title. It's I'm sorry. That was terrible. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Oahu McDaniel.
Yes, we'll be back next week. I guess we're going to try to do these on Thursdays usually.
Yeah, I think that works for me.
Yeah, I mean maybe we'll see, because I realized maybe. As far as, well, you know what? They're evergreen, so it doesn't matter when they get plugged anywhere. So yeah, everyone check back in next Thursday. It will... why am I rambling? Well, it's late when we're recording this. I was going to say it'll no longer be Thanksgiving, and I'm like, what?
Next week, we will have an ending.
Next week we'll have an ending, like a good podcast. But this is, well, we go on tangents all the time, so that's why we can't end the show. So, yeah, so long, everybody. So long from the Empire State of New York.
Goodbye.
From Turner Broadcasting System, you're watching Superstation WTBS, Atlanta.